Hello, everybody, and welcome to your Rouxbe live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction and also one of your chef instructors in the courses. And in particular, I'd like to welcome you to today's office hours. This is your chance to ask cooking and food-related questions, and my opportunity to do my best to respond to them. And, as it gets started, I'd like to mention the usual couple of housekeeping items. And the first one is that, you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen some questions that have already been populated by some audience members. And if you would like to participate more directly, you're welcome to by typing in your question or a comment in the dialog box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and that'll make its way into the queue. And then the second item is that in the individual question boxes on the right-hand side, you'll see a heart-shaped icon. And if you would like that a particular question answered sooner than the others, feel free to click on that icon, and it'll bump it up in urgency, in priority. But have no fear. We'll get to all the topics today. All right. And, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's handful of questions at this point. And the first one is from Barbara, who writes, where can I find information on what vegetables are healthier eaten raw and which are best eaten cooked? This is an interesting question, Barbara. I have never seen such a list, and I doubt if a clean or simple list is available because, like so many things in our food world, vegetables are a complicated matter. And, when it comes to choosing vegetables to eat raw or cooked, they can each have advantages. On one hand, if we're eating foods in their raw state, we have greatest access to, whatever nutrients and goodness, all those phytonutrients in particular that are associated with the plant foods that we enjoy are going to be, on one hand, abundant. And however, on the other hand, there are some constituents of these foods, some components of these foods that are relatively difficult for our body to access in the raw state. And in fact, when heat is applied, when these food items are heat treated, which is a term for cooking, these constituents become more bioavailable to our body. And so the question you ask is not so simple. Instead, it's probably a good idea for most people most of the time to eat some mix of raw foods and their cooked counterparts in order to benefit from the way that our body processes and accesses these phytonutrients and other components of the food that we enjoy. Okay, so again, I'm not familiar with such a list. Instead, the prevailing discussion out there is to enjoy a broad foundation of food so that we get access to all these amino acids and the many, many, many phytonutrients, many of which we don't even know about yet, that are present in plant-based foods. Thank you. All right, and the next item is from Petra. Hello. And the question reads, please, can you advise on a really good plant-based book for a pregnancy? Thank you so much. Let's see here. We've got a couple of items to share with you, and these came in courtesy of Chef Shar. So I want to thank Chef Shar for sharing these resources. The first one is the PCRM website. And so the link is up for you to check that out. And then we've got another one, just let's see, a couple of items down here, bumped up now in sequence. It's a book, Plant-Fed Mamas, Holistic Guide, okay, to pregnancy. And you've got the Amazon link in front of you. These two sources come highly recommended, and I hope you'll check them out. Thank you. All right, and moving right along. Let's see. So from Sylvia, who says, what in your mind is the key to sticking to a whole food, plant-based way of eating? From one who keeps sliding back and recommitting. Thanks, says Sylvia. Well, this is a good question, and I think one that probably a lot of people have asked at one point or another. And yeah, one thing that I think about, first of all, when it comes to doing anything, whether it's going for a walk in the morning, doing some push-ups in the afternoon, eating whole food, plant-based, whatever it is, and that is that the endeavor is 90% mental. And the remaining 10% is just what we do. It's taking that first step in the morning. It's reaching for this and not that in the refrigerator. And if the concern here is to the total avoidance of animal-based foods, then I think we need to sit down with ourselves and have that heart-to-heart discussion with ourselves, and think about what it is that we want to do. And next steps would be to shape the environment in which we want to be. And I understand at the same time that many of us live with other people that are on a different type of a diet, and therefore there may be some things in our environment that we'd prefer not to eat. In other words, the animal-based ingredients or food items, and so this is where we fall back on that earlier discussion we had with ourselves, and where we mustered up that resolve to be a different person, not just to try to eat in a different way, but it's an identity shift. It's a self-perception change that I think is really needed at a deeper level if this is what you want to do. And this, think about anything else you might want to do. If you want to become a good basketball player, you need to resolve to practice playing basketball every day, or piano, or something else. It can't be twice a week, and then then with expectations that you do this thing very well. And so there needs to be an identity shift and a routine that's created. And the other part of this is. And I may not be speaking directly to you, Sylvia, when I say this, but certainly for some of us, maybe you don't need to do the 100% plant-based lifestyle. Maybe it's mostly plants. Call it 90%, 95%, and maybe on occasion, you reach for a little something that you have enjoyed in the past that is derived from animal ingredients, animal foods. And so, think about that as well. Think about that approach. And if that is something that you can live with, in which case you can be a little bit easier on yourself rather than harsh. And, this brings me to this idea of, finding the joy around food and, of course, cooking. And to maintain a positive outlook, the good vibes that, again, the joy around eating and mealtime. One thing that I'll say hurts, when I hear people and talk to people that really struggle with trying to do something that maybe they really don't want to do. Is the negative emotions that creep into mealtime and food, which should be nourishing and positive for all of us. And we need to find that balance, and balance means different things for different people. Um, but those are a few thoughts that come to mind, Sylvie, and hopefully you'll find something in there that is meaningful to you, that you might check out, that you might try out. Whether it's that talk with yourself regarding being 100% plant-based, or maybe it's that talk with yourself about allowing 5% of non-plant ingredients to come into your life, so that you do maintain that joy around food, cooking, and meal times. Thank you. All righty. And the next one up is from Philip, who says, what are your thoughts on heritage breeds in pork, poultry, and beef, and educating the public on these breeds and promoting them? Would Ruby do a course on these and game meats, such as pheasants, grouse, quail, etc.? Okay, so let me address your second question first, Philip, and that is a resounding maybe. These are sorts of things that we're always interested in considering. And, I'm happy to sit down with my colleagues and throw this idea out for discussion and, see where it goes. No promises, but I love these new topics, and this one is pretty interesting. And on to your first question, and that is, what are my thoughts on heritage breeds of livestock and educating the public and promoting these items? My quick answer would be that yes. I'm a fan of all these things. This idea of heirloom food, or in the case of livestock, we often use the term heritage breeds. In terms of what that is, let me share a couple of thoughts for the audience. And one is that heritage breeds of livestock, and probably heirloom produce as well, is going to go back to foods, and these are generally foods that we're talking about. So even though these are animals, they can be pets, but we'll talk about them in the context of food and cooking from a culinary perspective. These are items that were available up until, or I should say readily available up until about the end of World War II, right about that time frame, so the middle of the last century. And so in other words, it would have been the generations prior to that, going into the 1800s, 1700s, and even earlier, when people were doing the breeding and identifying traits or characteristics that they that they wanted to promote, right, in certain breeds. And so the idea was that folks would breed animals that were most suited to the local environment. And so what characterizes these animals are going to be perhaps longevity, if that was important to folks. It's going to be again adaptability to local climate, local geography and topography, so we've had such a great variety of breeds in each of these categories that you've mentioned, whether it's swine or poultry or beef, and other categories too. But once we got to about the end of World War II, so 1950, let's call it, we see the industrialization of food broadly, so whether it's agriculture or animal husbandry, the livestock industry really take off. And so when you start to standardize production of anything, you need to simplify that product so that it'll fit through your factory system as easily as possible. And then over time, these last several decades, we, the consumer, have been provided a smaller and smaller selection of food to choose from. And so what Philip is suggesting is, or at least asking me my thoughts on, would be this idea of seeing more, right, of this diversity, this genetic diversity in our environment. And I think it's a wonderful thing. These animals, they not only do they look different, look interesting, look beautiful, but there's a genetic diversity that is maintained, with greater variety. And these animals taste different. The muscle composition and other characteristics are different. And of course, originally they were bred to be most suitable for a specific environment, a specific region or locale. And they were very different from one another, in their flavor and anatomical characteristics. And so, what do I think about educating the public? I'm all for that. Be prepared for probably a slow progression. As so many people, at least in the United States, and I'll speak specifically for the folks in the United States, the collective we tend to buy on price, and we are addicted to cheap food. And when you talk about heirloom produce or heritage breeds of livestock, we're talking about higher prices, certainly in this environment. So it becomes a more difficult sell to most consumers. But I think there's a lot of benefit in making that effort. And maybe a Ruby course is the first, or another step, I should say, in that direction, because there are folks out there that are working hard to conserve these breeds. And I appreciate your question, Philip. It's a very interesting topic, and a big one, right, for consumers to wrestle with, to know about, to understand, and then to try out as well. All right, thank you very much. Next up from Maria. With your Ayurvedic expertise, for someone of Vata composition, what foods should be consumed and avoided to remove fecal body odor and restless leg syndrome? Okay. So Maria, you're asking a couple of very specific sort of questions here, which I'm not able to answer. I would recommend that you reach out to a Ayurvedic care provider to address fecal body odor and restless leg syndrome, specifically because there's going to be a much longer workup that'll be a part of this. Okay. Anyone who works with you should take the time to get your full life history, in addition to your medical history and your family's medical history. Okay. Start to address your Vikriti, your innate state of balanced doshas versus your Prakriti, which is your current state of imbalance, so that gap can be addressed with whatever approach is going to be most suitable for you. Now, more generally speaking, in terms of what food should be consumed for someone of a Vata dosha, Vata people, the Vata constitution is generally characterized, okay, by dryness and a lot of movement. It could be mental as well as physical, and emotional, spiritual, just movement across all the facets of the human. And so generally foods that are recommended are going to be heavier, grounding foods, and sweet foods like grains, as well as fruits are going to be part of that. Things like legumes have some heaviness to them and some sweetness to them. Depending on the individual, they should often be taken with some moderation because um, many legumes are also characterized by astringency, which can aggravate Vata dosha. So do take care in terms of those staple foods, okay, in your diet. Um, and then, also to maintain a consistent daily, especially sleep schedule and meal schedule, is desirable for the Vata individual. And so to get a good night's sleep, aim for that, 8-ish hours. But going to sleep at about the same time and getting up at about the same time is desirable, okay, to maintain that sort of consistency in your body rhythm, okay, is going to be a good thing. And the daily abhyanga or massage with oil is also recommended for folks with a Vata composition. Again, some of this will vary a little bit depending on other details about you, okay, regarding the possibility of other doshas that are prominent. Many times we are not just characterized by one, but often two doshas, and some of us even by all three. So we'd want to drill down a little bit deeper to see, just who you are, Maria, at a more detailed level. Okay, but sesame oil is a warming oil and is often recommended for folks of a Vata composition. Okay, so those are a few ideas that come to mind. But again, I recommend that you would work more directly with an Ayurvedic care provider that can drill down and really understand who you are and look at not just the main doshas, but the sub doshas and whatever else might be leading to these two conditions that you have mentioned. Okay, thank you. Okay, and next up from Peter. If I was to start growing microgreens, so sprouting greens, do you have any recommendations? Jump on in and just start sprouting stuff. Okay, most things will sprout pretty easily. Um, Environmentally, it's going to be affected by the temperature. So some of these things can sprout and really take off overnight, or even just after a few hours in a warm environment, such as during a summer day. But during the winter time, things can slow down. You might require, 3 or 4 days to really get some tails to poke out. And if you want some longer sprouts, just be patient and let the grain or the legume that you're working with or other seeds do their thing. Here at home, we're usually sprouting something each week, and very often it's a lentil, and then secondarily a grain of some sort. But we'll let that item soak, usually overnight, to get some good hydration going, and then cut the water or strain the water, and then we'll tie it up in a light cotton linen, and just kind of bring the corners up and tie it so you have this big bunch down here, and then we'll hang that in the kitchen with a bowl underneath to catch dripping water, and probably just once a day you can wet that whole bundle. And then again, just let it hang and let excess water drip and just kind of keep it moisturized. And then before long, you'll see sprouts. It really is about that easy. You might try that out, with that very simple set of equipment, really just a towel and a bowl to catch some water, and see how it goes for you. There is some more specialized equipment that you can buy. You might find that you don't need it. I'll leave that up to you. But yeah, give it a try. I think you'll enjoy the fruits of your labor. Thank you. All right. Next up from L. Hi there. I don't know the difference between onion and garlic powder, granules, dried mince, dried flakes. When do you use which? Are there guidelines for substitutions, fresh or dried? Aha. Okay. So we're jumping into a question here about food processing and some of the applications. The difference between onion and garlic. Let me focus on powder granules, minced flakes. Okay, and generally speaking, those are simply going to be different sizes, different sort of processed sizes of that given item, whether it's onion or garlic in this case. And when do you use which? So there's a lot of flexibility. Okay, so when you look at a recipe and it calls for let me back up in here and say that garlic powder, or the powder, is going to be the finest in texture, and it increases in size according to your list. So granules will be a little bit bigger, followed by minced pieces, and then dried flakes are going to be something much larger. Okay, but again, there's a lot of flexibility. If the larger pieces are going to have more texture to them and more mouthfeel. So, if you're adding a dried flake to something, maybe it goes into something that is moist so that it has a chance to rehydrate and become a little bit more tender on the palate, even though it might maintain a little bit of chew. These are small pieces, and so they're going to add some subtle texture. Versus a powder, or even a granule, which is still pretty small. When you add these to something, you may not notice the texture at all. With powder, I would say certainly not. At least I don't pick up any texture with a powder. One thing with powder is, because it is so fine, when you with certain preparations, and I'm thinking of maybe I don't know. Maybe it's steamed broccoli, okay, and you put garlic powder or onion powder on that. It may have a tendency to sort of cake onto the surface, and maybe even produce a little bit of gumminess, which visually, as well as from a mouth feel perspective, would not be desirable. Versus a larger cut. Okay, I'm looking at your list here. I'm thinking maybe minced garlic. All right, so there's a lot of overlap. Okay, when it comes to recipes, it's up to the recipe author. But when it comes to you, the cook, you have full control. My recommendation is always to try 2 or 3 or 4 of these different styles. We call them market forms of this given ingredient, and see how you like it. Okay. There's, in the world of cooking, there usually isn't just one correct answer. There's usually multiple opportunities to get it right. And part of that is going to depend upon your personal preference. Okay. Now, guidelines for using fresh or dried. If you've got a dry blend of that you're concocting, a spice blend, an herb blend, then it's usually nice to blend in dried components. Onion granules or garlic powder, for example, just in terms of the shelf life. If this is something that you want to maintain for some period of time because you made a large quantity of it, let's say. Okay. The fresh counterparts will have more aroma, and aroma equals flavor. And so probably 98 out of 100 times my preference, would be to reach for the fresh product and then to work it from there. Also keep in mind that, within the fresh category, that you have different varieties of onions. and different varieties of garlic that you might come across. And it's going to be up to you to taste these, first of all, and determine what you like. Again, because so much of what you do in your kitchen is going to be dictated by your personal preference. Aside from your personal preference, you might also take into consideration cultural conventions. For example, if you're making some recipes from different regions of the world, you might stick with the way that it is generally done in that part of the world in order to better understand that culinary experience. Okay. Now, when I say that, I also want to throw out the caveat that um, when you go to some place in the world and you see some dish made, it's in my experience, it's never just made in a single manner. Locally, you'll have people in different households and different restaurants that do it a little bit differently. And whereas when we come back home, thousands of miles away from that regional cuisine, what we see is often represented by one recipe, that single most popular recipe online, or some very close variation of that. Whereas in reality, there will be much more variation when you go to the home country or region of that food item. But so anyway, what I'm saying is, um, if you're making international cuisines, global cuisines, regional cuisines, sure, try to replicate to the best that we can those dishes and get to know those ingredients if they're new to us, that particular type of garlic, that particular type of onion, for example. But in your own cooking, it's up to your personal preference. So when we talk about onions and garlic, you've got sweetness intensity, you have bitterness or heat intensity. Those might be two different things. You have the color, such as red or purple onions that have a certain presentation to them, a certain visual appeal, and therefore a certain function, right, in that preparation. And sometimes it's simply based upon a convenience, such as I buy my onions in bulk. Therefore, I want them to have a long shelf life, and so I'm going to buy Spanish yellow onions and not Maui sweet onions because they have a shorter shelf life. And so there are different ways, to approach what you choose more specifically. Okay. But again, going back to your question here, fresh versus dried, I'm just simply a big fan of fresh ingredients. There will be other cooks out there that may be more amenable to dried foods for whatever reason. And we can probably come up with 10 reasons, as to why someone might favor that. But again, that's going to be up to you, Al, to figure out what fits into your style and your preference. Okay. But again, get out there and try, compare, do side-by-side taste tests, and learn at a deeper level, for yourself, what these things can do for you. Thank you. All right, Cynthia, thank you. Would you have any suggestions on kitchen use, setup use? I've had to move to a smaller apartment and kitchen with little space, preparing and storing. Refrigerator also smaller. Okay. Well, let me see here. I'm a visual learner. And if I were to just take a peek at your kitchen, I think, I would be triggered with with so many more ideas here, perhaps. But, in terms of kitchen setup, try to eliminate redundancy. Okay. So, if you've got 7 different knives for kitchen work, but you really only need 2 or 3, then get rid of a few of them. Okay. And so think about redundancy also in larger equipment. Okay. I'll give you an example here at home. For a long time, we've had, these stovetop espresso makers. And then off the side here, this larger electric plug-in coffee brewer. And I had been using the electric drip coffee maker for a really long time, really just out of habit. While I would be looking at the stovetop espresso maker sitting off to the side here every morning at the same time, I finally got to the point where I unplugged this electric coffee maker, cleaned it up, put it in a box, and took it down to Goodwill. And so now I freed up that space on the counter, and I'm just using the stovetop espresso maker. It takes a little bit longer to make in the morning, just a few minutes though, not a lot, but it's a nice routine for me. And it's part of that morning ritual, around coffee or whatever it is. In this case, it's coffee. But I got rid of some of that redundancy. Okay, and think about is the numbers of service ware as well. So if you're in a smaller place, or you live by yourself, or maybe the kids have moved out, and so it's just two of you at home, and you no longer need that 10 or 12 piece table setting. Maybe you can whittle that down to four plates, 4 bowls, for example. Consider those sort of changes as well. And if it's a full set that you have, and you don't want to break, not break it, but break the set, to whittle it down to 4 pieces, just give the whole thing away and replace it, with a smaller set that you're more comfortable with. So things like that. Okay. Small refrigerator, that's perfect. I think that means we need to structure our day and our week in a way where clearly we're shopping more frequently, which means that we need to make the mental change, right? Because 90% of life is mental, 10% is what we do about it. And so if we start to structure our day in our week in a way that is maybe more focused on food and food prep, then we see ourselves going to the grocery store every other day, maybe different grocery stores to get different ingredients in order to accommodate the small refrigerator. Okay. And so again, try it out. These sorts of changes can be taken in small steps. There's no need to make revolutionary changes over a weekend. Take it step by step, and think and feel how you adapt to the change. Okay, and enjoy the process. Thank you. All right, Betty. Betty says, what's your approach to teaching a hands-on cooking class for about 10 people? I'm looking for logistics. Do you give everyone a recipe and let them go, or do you incorporate demos and teaching? I like this question. I used to do this every day, and I miss it. So I'm glad you asked this question, Betty. So yeah, think about what your objective is. All right, and so in an educational setting, if it's, well, let me back up here. When we talk about a cooking class for 10 people, this can mean different things. Okay, it depends on your audience, depends on the occasion. Okay, and depends on how much time you have, how much space you have. There are, for example, hands-on cooking classes that might take place on a Friday or Saturday night for adults or couples who really just want to sort of hang out and drink wine and socialize, and then enjoy some really good food. And that's where their emphasis is. And so the hands-on and the cooking lesson or educational component of that is secondary. Okay. And there are other settings where the goal is really to teach people some key learning outcomes. For example, young people who are going off to college. Okay, and you want to teach this cohort some key cooking methods and techniques that will form the cornerstone of their daily or weekly meal prep, in their dorm or their apartment or whatever the situation is once they move out of the house. And so think about that. And, the learning outcomes, I think, is going to be an important place to start. And if you have some key learning outcomes that you want to cover, then start out the class with a demo. So the student can see what is being emphasized, understand it, ask questions to clarify, um, and then move on from that point into their own hands-on experience. Or you can do the whole thing in front of them, let them taste it to understand that whole process, and then they go to their station, okay, to replicate that process themselves. And once you get started, you circulate right through the kitchen to the different prep tables or teams, or however, the pods, however you organize the kitchen, always giving pointers, reinforcing what it is that you showed in your demo or that you emphasized in your introduction. It could be food safety and sanitation. It could be the safe way to hold a knife as you develop your knife skills. It could be the proper browning on a saute. It could be the proper heat of the oil for deep frying. So there's going to be these different aspects to what it is that you're doing. Okay. And so do you just give everyone a recipe and let them go for it? Well, you can have people work individually, in which case you need the space and the time to accommodate that, or you can have them work in pairs, okay, in which case things go a little bit faster. You can also, let's say you have a team of 4 or 5, and you can just give, you have these different teams of 4 and 5. You can give each of them a packet of recipes and have them figure out who wants to make what. And then each team, would prepare that set of recipes. Those recipes can be identical, or they can be different. Like this team can work on appetizers. These 2 teams can work on main courses. And then this team over here can work on the sweet component or the desserts. Again, it depends on the purpose, okay, of the gathering here. And what I just outlined was from my experiences in the past doing corporate team building exercises or cooking classes, where the hands-on, the educational outcome is secondary, and there are other things that are primary, right, to that event. But it's all done through the medium of food. So, I hope some of those different scenarios make sense for you, Betty, and that you resonate with something in there that I just shared. If you've got other more specific questions, feel free to reach out at support@rouxbe.com, and I'd be happy to continue this conversation with you. Thank you. All right, Kathy. Are there any creamy soup recipes where the cooked vegetables from stock can be used? I haven't come across any recipes, but just make something. Okay, I think part of our goal at Rouxbe, right, as you move through the Forks Over Knives course or the Pro Plant course or Pro Cook, is that you're going to understand cooking methods and the ancillary techniques of the kitchen, and that you will gain more and more control over the process of cooking, and you will rely less and less on specific recipes. Okay, you might look at a recipe for a little inspiration, maybe a little bit of guidance, just to get out of the gate. But from there, you're going to have the chops to put something together in your own style. Okay, so in terms of using the vegetables that have been simmered, right, from as a byproduct of stock production, Put those in a blender. And, if you're making a cream of soup, this is what we call this category here, cream of, you fill in the blank. Figure out what your creamy base is going to be. If we're talking about, well, let me use some language from the conventional kitchen, okay, and that is cream of soups can be based, broadly speaking, on the bechamel, okay, which is thickened milk. It's milk thickened with a white roux, okay, or a velouté, which is stock. That it's a white stock that is thickened with a blonde roux. And then the plant-based kitchen, right? We can come up with something that are analogs to or equivalencies to those, and then just add the vegetables from your stock, and then blend it up with your your velouté sauce to make a certain type of a cream of soup. Okay, or it might be that bechamel-based soup. But I think that you've got a great foundation here. It's just a matter of taking that next step and concocting something yourself, understanding that you need to use herbs and spices and perhaps even other ingredients to bring balance and to prop up that foundation of flavor that you're building. Okay, and have some fun with it. There's a lot of experimentation to be enjoyed in this process. Thank you, Kathy. All right. And CL says some traditional vegetables that are unfamiliar. Two that I'd like to try are parsnips and rhubarb. What are guidelines to buy these and some whole food plant-based low sugar recipe recommendations? Wow. Okay. So guidelines for buying, the guidelines for buying produce are going to be generally the same. Okay. Look for items that are relatively heavy for their size. Okay. Which means that the moisture content is high, which means that it probably hasn't been sitting around for an excessively long time and dehydrated. Okay. Also, ideally, you're going to find items that have minimal blemishes on the surface. I'm not always a proponent of pristine produce. I think that we should just be using whatever produce we have access to. But clearly, if things have some mold or little spots of rot due to maybe some mishandling or improper storage, this sort of thing, that maybe we skip over those things. And then, a parsnip is a root vegetable. And so you can use that just as you would carrots and as a place to start. Okay. Parsnips have a lot of sweetness to them, but they have a very distinct flavor. And so they're often blended with other items in order to balance that intense aroma and flavor that they come with. You can oven roast parsnips. You can turn them into a puree, in which case, again, you might blend it with some other thing like a potato, or it could be carrots or some other root vegetable. And then just start out with that and see how you like it. And you don't have to add any sugar. They're pretty sweet. And again, using herbs and spices and other ingredients to build up the flavor, garlic and onions, and so on and so forth. Try out soups and roasted vegetable salads or even just roasted vegetables on the side, and see how you like those things. Dressings, right, to coat some of these items to finish can really tailor an item in a certain direction or another. Okay. And rhubarb, in my experience, has a lot of sourness to it. And, in order to be balanced, it often is paired with sugar. I don't have any low sugar recommendations off the top of my head, but I'd imagine if you look online, you're going to find plenty of ways to handle rhubarb, or at least to get you started, and see how you like it. It's all up to you to adjust the sugar to suit whatever situation you're in terms of sugar intake. But give it a try. And it's all about, as you say, getting to know these unfamiliar ingredients, but then also developing your knowledge for handling these things, in particular situations. All right. Thank you. All right. And another question from Elle, who says, for Rouxbe assignments, a hand masher is often recommended. Do commercial chefs use hand mashers? When are mashers, food processors with pulsing, stand mixers, and hand mixers best used commercially? Okay. So let me see here. So do commercial chefs use hand mashers? Some of them probably do. It's really a matter of, well, it's probably a couple of things at least. One is going to be a volume consideration. If we have a lot of, pureeing or mashing to do, we will often put it into a stand mixer or a mixer of some sort, and just let that do its work while we can then shift our attention over here, to do something else. Okay. Or it might just be the convenience, the speed, of using a stand mixer, which can, whip up a batch of mashed potatoes, for example, in a couple of 3 minutes or so, versus maybe 3 times that long if you're doing it by hand. Maybe, if you're after a comparable smooth texture. But yeah, certainly if it's a smaller volume, I can see that some folks might use these sort of hand tools. In my experience, anyway, it's usually been electric equipment. And your next question is, when are these various things used? And, so it depends on what you're making. Okay. For the usual mashed something, okay, like mashed potato sort of a preparation, and we can swap in and blend and do different things with different, ingredients. But let's just use that as a base for the discussion here. In that case, I would reach for a stand mixer probably 100% of the time, okay, or very close to that, just because of the convenience that I talked about a couple of minutes ago, okay. And you can certainly buy stand mixers in different sizes, right? Bowls of different capacities. I mean, you can buy them big enough to take a bath in, or something that's about 6 quarts, which is more home size, but we also see those in commercial kitchens too. But often it's going to be something somewhere in between. All right. So maybe it's a 10 quart, let's say, maybe a 15 quart mixer, which will handle a pretty big crowd and do all these things. Now, a food processor will cut through these things at a much higher speed, and can create more stickiness or gumminess with certain food products. Okay. Now, on the other hand, if you're making hummus and you got a bunch of garbanzo beans, I wouldn't use a stand mixer. I would put them in a food processor. Okay, because I want that blade to cut through and really give me that smoother texture. And so there's going to be some differences, based upon what dish that you're making, what sort of preparation that you're producing. Okay. Yeah, so those are a couple of examples. Now from there, each kitchen's a little bit different. Okay. I would say that as far as those 2 examples I just gave you, making mashed potatoes and making hummus, most kitchens are going to reach for a stand mixer or a food processor. But again, I could envision smaller operations making smaller batches of something that might use a manual masher, right, or a hand mixer, with a couple of those little prongs sticking out. Okay. But most restaurants in my experience, would be in the middle, okay, using a stand mixer and a food processor for different situations. Thank you. All right, Kathy's asking, what is the refrigerator shelf life of dressings, i.e. Dijon vinaigrette, mustard maple with cannellini, sesame garlic? Okay, yeah, let me start by saying that the general guideline for shelf life for leftover food is about a week, okay? And now, having said that, there are some things that may last a little bit less than that, and there are many things that may last a little bit longer than that. But let's start with 1 week, okay, as that pretty safe guideline, provided your refrigerator temperature is about where it needs to be, in the 30s, probably upper 30s or so, and that containers and utensils are clean. In other words, you're not double dipping, okay, and introducing saliva and the enzymes in our saliva that can more quickly break down foods, resulting in spoilage. Okay, so things like dressings are often relatively higher in acid or salt or some other preserving ingredient, okay? And in which case, these items will last longer than this 7-day guideline that I like to start out with, okay, in these discussions. How long will they last? I don't know. It just depends. And so you'll need to keep a vigilant eye and nose and tongue, as you analyze these foods each time you use them. And I would say this is true of any leftover food and probably any food that you are going to consume. I don't care if it's brand new or if it's been sitting around for 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 days. We need to engage with it before we ingest it. Okay. And so we use all of our senses to evaluate the food. Foods will start to change in appearance. Sometimes it's a color change. Sometimes it's frothiness on the surface or some sort of growth that we recognize as being out of place. Sometimes the smell changes. Okay, whether it's a sourness or a bitterness that develops. Same thing on the tongue. We can pick up bitterness or sourness as bacteria consume the sugar. All right, sweetness drops off, and then flavors start to shift. And I recommend tasting everything. Okay, if you clearly know it's bad, then you can skip that part. But if you're not sure, then you got to taste it. I mean, ultimately, that's where the enjoyment is going to be. Okay. And I used to tell my students, when in doubt, put it in your mouth. And that's the best way to try it out. And I'd get people that would take a step back and I'd have to try it for them and show them it was okay to use this approach. It's probably not going to kill you. I can't guarantee that, but probably not. Don't go gulping down food that is in question, but just taste it, okay, and see how you like it. And that's really where dressings are going to be. They could last for months, but depending on what's in them, they may just last 7 days. Okay, so I'd like you to use all of your senses and to build that confidence up around analyzing food for food safety. Thank you. All right, Cynthia, regarding sprouting, she says, I have not tried it yet. I recently saw information on sprouting buckwheat groats. I love buckwheat. Wonder if sprouting a good idea. Can I eat it raw once sprouted? Sprouting is always a good idea. It's generally it shifts the enzyme profile, the nutrient profile, at least a little bit. And, some things are usually eaten raw and some things are not. And I would recommend a couple of approaches. One would be to do a little search. Dr. Google can help you with that and see what people are doing. okay, with buckwheat groats or something else, okay? And then number two would be to try it and see how you like it, okay? And just because everyone out there is doing it one way doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you will like it. If that's the situation, then go ahead and cook it and find a way for you to enjoy it, okay? Thank you. And then Joanne says, hello from Wales. What's the safest and best wood for a chopping board? Do they need any special maintenance? Let's see, woods for chopping boards. I've come across various types of woods. I mean, oak I see every once in a while, and maple cutting boards are quite popular. These tend to be um, uh, I'll say hardwoods. They're not the hardest woods out there, but they're pretty hard. Not like pine, which is pretty soft. And so those are a couple of good choices. And certainly, if you do a search, you're going to find lots and lots of information on cutting boards. And in terms of maintenance, they should be cleaned after each use. I recommend immediately after each use. Wooden boards benefit from air drying, and I like to just leave it out so that have a place to store it that's just out in your kitchen, so that it can air dry over time. And it also depends on the tradition. Many of boards, in the U.S. anyway, are treated with oil, okay, as a maintenance step as needed. It could be every several weeks. It could be every few months. But there are also cutting boards that I have seen in Japan that are not oiled. They're just otherwise cleaned and dried, but not oiled. So it'll depend on the local tradition based upon what kind of woods are used. And so again, I recommend doing some deeper reading on your interest area. Thank you. And Cynthia, all right. Batten cleanup today for today's program. Regarding your answer to my downsizing, that was affirming and encouraging. Excellent. I've been working on many of your suggestions, but your answers were very helpful. A plus to think on. Fresher is better. Okay, good. I'm so happy that you found some of this information to be relevant to your situation. And move on, with this different experience and enjoy that process, Cynthia. And thank you to all of you as we get to the end of our program today. I'm so glad that you could join me for my office hours, and I'll look forward to seeing you again at the next opportunity. Thank you.